where his first shot landed was on the door frame of the door, and it actually, when it impacted, pushed the door back into Kim. And if he'd have been 2 inches, 3 inches more to the right, he would have either hit Kim in the shoulder or he would have shot me in the head. So that's a little closer than I like my incoming fire. I remember making it home, having to leave my boots outside, walk into the utility room to take off my uniform because it was covered in blood. I walked through to the bedroom and started to take off my vest, and the Velcro coming undone woke my wife up. Because I didn't honestly, truly believe that I was drunk. I really didn't. And I got on my way down there to the store. I guess I was weaving pretty good because a citizen called in and said that I was weaving. And when I got to the store, I realized, well, shit, I forgot my wallet. So I was going to drive back home. And I didn't realize it, but police had been waiting on me. And I got out on the street and they pulled me over. Said somebody had called in on me. Long story short, I was arrested for DWI. I'm about to go to jail, involuntarily go to jail. That tornado's coming at you. Your life and career and everything is the lone trailer sitting in the field, and it's coming right at
you. You're listening to the ATO Bridging the Divide podcast, brought to you by the Assist the Officer Foundation.
Since 1999, the ATO has given assistance to the first responder community, and now we want to give them a platform to hear their incredible stories.
We also want to hear the stories of the many people that support us.
Our community is small, but it is strong.
We have differences. We don't always agree, and we all make mistakes.
But together we can grow, we can heal.
And we can learn from those mistakes.
And together we can bridge the divide.
We never know which lives we influence, or when, or why. Not until the future eats the present, anyways. We know when it's too late. Stephen King. Today's story will be full of emotions, full of elation, promise, sadness, and tragedy. But it also will demonstrate growth and resilience and the beautiful human qualities of adapting and surviving. Today's guest is someone who joined the Dallas Police Department and had visions of serving. And he did. He did at a high level. He knew only survival and success at the Dallas Police Department. We will hear his successes, his addiction to the chase and thrill of accomplishments in doing old-fashioned police work, catching bad guys, helping families. But police work and the toll it can take isn't a fairy tale. Some careers are long and accomplished, and some officers make it out the other side unscathed. Then there are times that life, being alive, shows us exactly how it can change on a dime. This story will demonstrate how fragile life and circumstances can be, and how one mistake, one misstep, can make life turn on a dime. Daniel Jamieson, welcome to the ATO stage.
Thanks for having me.
It's been a while since I've seen you. You look great. I'm excited to get your story out there. I think it's going to resonate with a lot of people on a lot of different levels. You have a lot of friends on this PD, and you have a lot of friends outside the PD. And there's probably a lot about you and your career that a lot of people don't know about. And we're gonna get into that and kind of pull back the curtain on you.
Looking forward to it.
I want to welcome on my co-host, the great Kent Wolverton's here. Sergeant Omar Figueroa. He's my boss.
That's right.
We're gonna start off slow, like always, and we're just gonna, we're gonna get into it.
Okay, let's
right.
do it.
Let's talk about where you grew up. I saw in your bio. You were not born in this country. Tell us about it.
I was not. So my parents met in Austin, and my dad got his PhD in physics, and got a job in West Berlin, Germany, doing his postdoc work. And they moved out there. My mom was a pharmacist, civilian pharmacist working for the Army out there. And while they were there for about 4 years. And while they were there, they had me. And moved back to the States when I was, about a year and a half, 2 years old, something like that.
So he got his PhD. What did he do? Like,
he was a physicist.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Damn.
So he ended up coming back and getting a job at SMU, teaching physics at SMU, and left there and worked for, back many years ago, they were building a particle collider here. It was going to actually encircle Waxahachie, and he worked there until the funding for that dried up.
Man, that's like some Tony Stark shit there. That's impressive.
Next level intellect.
Yeah. How did you get law enforcement with parents with that kind of medical fields?
I don't know. It skips a generation, I guess.
So, what was home life like for you when you get back to the United States, and you're 2, right?
Yeah. So we moved to Duncanville. My mom grew up in Dallas. She went to Kimball. My aunt and uncle, I think, went to Carter. So lots of ties to the Dallas area. My grandparents lived just down the road from the I don't know what they call it now. It used to be the Oak Cliff Country Club right there off Redbird, just down the way from that.
I know what you're talking about. Is that Frost Farms?
Yeah, I think that's the name of the neighborhood. Yeah.
It's very
Channel 7 right there. Yeah.
That's a nice neighborhood.
It looks, and the last time I was over there, it looks exactly the same as
yeah,
it
it's
did.
kind of the Kessler Park of that area.
Kinda,
really.
Yeah.
My older brother, he graduated from Carter, and I went to the elementary around there, so I know that area very well.
I think I'm probably going to get this wrong. I'm going to get yelled at by my mom, but I think my uncle was in the first graduating class of Carter. Like, they opened Carter while my mom was there, and she had the opportunity to go. She was like, "No, I want to graduate with my friends," so she stayed at Kimball.
Wow, and that's a huge rivalry between them two.
Yeah, yep.
Bitter,
very much so.
So you go from Germany to Duncanville, which is totally it's
yeah.
You know,
and
there's not the beautiful country scenery that you have in Germany.
No, I grew up there. I mean, I had a great childhood. My parents obviously big into education. I was decent in school when I applied myself.
Yeah, hey, same here.
And ended up all the way through 9th grade going to public school there, and then
which school? Duncanville.
Yeah, Duncanville.
Okay.
All the way through. Went through the 9th grade school there because they have their separate 9th grade because everything's there's so many students there. And then I had been diagnosed with some learning differences early on, and my parents were able to get me into the Winston School, which is in Dallas, and I ended up graduating from there. That school specializes in kids with learning differences and different ways of adaptive teaching and things like that, and ended up graduating from there.
Okay. At what point did you decide to go the law enforcement route?
So I ended up going to Baylor, met my wife there, and we moved back after I graduated in 2005. Moved back to Dallas. We were living up in North Dallas, and I was working at a place that builds sets for operas and plays and trade shows and scenic construction, things like that. And I really was not liking the direction that my life was going. I just wasn't happy, professionally, and everything was just a struggle. So naturally, law enforcement seems like a good move. Background on that: my wife, her dad was a civilian forensic accident reconstructionist, and he worked very closely with law enforcement. So she had grown up around cops a lot. There were always cops drinking coffee on the back porch. The very first time I ever went and met her folks, the next morning I come downstairs and there's 2 Texas Rangers sitting on the back porch. Don't know that was an accident.
Yeah.
But so I got exposed after being with her for a few years to that world, and I'd always kind of kicked it around. It was always just something that was interesting. But then you start hearing the stories, and then you start seeing kind of what it's really like, and you're actually talking to the cops and listening to them, and you're like, okay, this is pretty cool. And I sat her down one day, and I said, hey, Dallas is hiring. Like, there's billboards everywhere. There's all these hiring bonuses and things like that. What do you think? And she's like, well, the only 2 things you can't do is be a motor jock and vice. And I said, okay. And
She's heard the Vice stories, clearly.
yes.
Yeah. So the police world sounded a lot more appealing than setting up stage props
Yes.
in
Yes.
the opera.
Yes.
But you did have a background in theater, right?
I did. So that's what my degree is in. So I was a trained actor. And so I was.
So you could have gone to Vice and done well.
I could have. Yeah, I could have done the UC work.
There might be a picture around there where memes were made out of.
There might be. I appreciate that. That's your fault, by the way.
I know. Shout out to Sergeant Nash.
Yeah, I'd like to see that pic, actually.
I'll send it. Maybe you can post it.
No, Lord.
So
you're gonna have to put a disclaimer on the on the podcast.
we always do. Don't worry. So you just saw Dallas is hiring, which Dallas is always hiring
Yes.
because we have a turnover rate here like no other.
Yes.
Did you have prior to hiring on or applying? Did you have any interactions with Dallas PD?
Outside of getting a ticket, no.
Okay, just that.
Yeah, just that. I think 3 or 4 years before I hired on, I'd gotten a ticket by motor jock, and that's about it.
What year did you hire on?
08, February of 08.
And after you graduated, I don't know, what is it, about September, October?
It was October.
You go out to Southeast Division?
Yep, out to sunny Southeast.
Yeah, so when you got out there, what struck you most as far as once you get out? I mean, when you're in training, it's warp speed, but
Yes.
once you got out and about and kind of learning your way, what struck you most about the actual work there?
So I started out on 5th watch, and so that was interesting watching kind of the day progress, because it's slow at the beginning of the shift, and then about the time the shift is ending, things are really starting to pick up with the call load and things like that. I was struck by, so my very, very first call was a disturbance that supposedly a group of people, they had baseball bats, they were beating somebody up in the middle of the street, and we pull up, and I kid you not, there's somebody in the front yard of this house, and they're doing the hand wave over their head like they did at the academy. I'm like, oh, it really is like this. No, it's really not, but that's just how it worked out. I was surprised, honestly, with the pacing. Like it was way faster than I expected. And everybody was like, oh, you're going to be so busy. It's Southeast. it was busier than even I thought it was going to be. And that's coming out of the academy and having, people who worked patrol at Southeast coming out and telling me how busy it was going to be. I was blown away.
Just with the call load?
Yeah. It was once it picked up right around noon, it just didn't stop. It was constant. And we were always chasing the radio.
Yeah, that crime puts its foot on the gas really early there. And really all divisions now.
It was just the kinds of calls, like just the craziness. And you're like, this is supposed to be on TV. No, this is real life.
Yeah, it's real life, and they make shows on it.
Yeah.
If you actually put it on TV, nobody would believe it was real. Like there's just so much going on that you can't fathom. Like it wouldn't make a good TV show because you couldn't keep up.
Well, you would think it's bullshit. Like, oh, this is embellished.
I remember I was stuck on something. I remember the call coming out that there was a car fire, a vehicle fire, and DFR shows up. They put the car out. They open the trunk, and there's a body with like 3 bullet holes in it. And the guy's still alive, and they're pulling him in. Now it's turning into a thing, and I'm like, I think I saw that in a movie. No, yeah, I'm sure I did see it in a movie, but it really happened there too.
It's like a mafia movie.
It really was, yeah.
So you hire out in end of 08. You get out on the streets, and I'm looking at your bio here in 2009 on Mesita. Mm-hmm. Tell us about that.
So that night, I was running around with a group of guys. Some of the best cops I ever worked with.
Better mention a name.
So one of them's no longer with the department, John Tutt. He transitioned out, went to Collin County Sheriff's Office.
Good dude.
Awesome dude. Greg Valtadoros. Mike Kroll was one of our buddies that we would run around with. And we were out answering calls. We were like a little pack that went around. We were always covering each other. I mean, that was the culture down there back then anyway. So we were always covering each other, and that night there was probably going to get the make wrong, but it was like a white Impala that was running around committing aggravated robberies, and there was at least 2, if not 3, in Southeast that night that we were like, okay, so they're hitting again. We're trying to find them, and everybody's on alert, waiting to find. Everybody's pulling over white Impalas, and then
a lot of white Impalas.
There's a lot of white Impalas. I was like, it's a bad day to be driving one of those down there. And so they had done 2 or 3 aggravated robberies, and we're sitting there talking after a call, and everyone gets on the radio and says Mesquite's in chase with a white Impala. They just committed an aggravated robbery in Mesquite. Shots fired at the offense. And they are coming down, I want to say it was Bruton. And we were at Masters and Bruton. And about the time they said they're coming down, here comes this white Impala through the intersection. Sparks, it does 70 right through the red light. And Mesquite's right on them. And we're trying to figure out where they are. Air One's trying to call it. And they bail out. And so before we get into that, I'm going to back up just a little bit on that. That day, one of the there are chaplains that are DPD chaplains that are there. I assume y'all work with them in the unit. So one of the chaplains that day, his name is Mike Middlebrooks. He always rode out with Greg and John, and that day he decided he was there. He wanted to ride out with me, and so we were going through all the pre-checks, telling him kind of how I did things, and we were going to hang tight with him too, but we might get pulled off, and he was getting to know me a little bit better, and he goes, "Have you been in any shootings?" And I was like, "No, not yet." And about 7.5 hours later, we're on the ground with ag robbery suspects, and one of the guys that ran ends up on the front porch of this house on Mesita that is unrelated to him completely. And all of a sudden we find ourselves there, and he's got a gun to his head. And we have people up front that are talking to him. Hey, man, put the gun down. You know, you don't want to do this. Put this down. Well, he ends up getting on his cell phone and calls his mom. And he's telling his mom on the phone, Mom, I didn't do anything. I don't know what's going on. I don't know why, you know, I didn't know what was going to happen, you know. And I'm sitting there in my mind thinking, why, do you have a gun? If you didn't do anything?
Were you just then hauling ass from police?
Yeah. And he starts saying things that are not good, like, tell my kids I love them. Mom, I love you. And he's rotating the gun from his temple to under his chin. And he keeps doing that as he's talking. And about the time he's done saying, Mom, tell my kids I love them, I love you, he drops the barrel of the gun and points the gun at the officers there. And we end up in a shooting.
Did you shoot?
I did.
Okay. So suspect goes down. Was he was by himself in that car?
No, there were other people in that car with him. He was, I think he was one of the backseat passengers, I think.
Is he the only one everybody else got out and fled, and he's the only one that kind of got barricaded, or how'd that look?
Yes, I think everybody else, all the other parts of that are a little bit of a blur, but I think he's the only one that got up and got barricaded. Everybody else was taken into custody.
Okay. So walk us through your emotions on that.
It was, I remember the gun going off. I remember firing and him dropping, and it was that just happened. Like, I just, you know, I really did just get in a shooting. And, you know, we approached the suspect. They rolled him over, and he was obviously deceased. And then you're sitting there, and the standard procedure is you go and, you know, they put you by yourself. Right now there's a criminal investigation, and you go sit in the car. Well, I go back to my car, and I'm sitting there with the chaplain, and he goes, "Are you okay?" Because he had heard all the gunfire. He goes, "Are you okay?" I said, "Yeah, I think so." And he goes, "Did you shoot?" I said, "Yeah."
You jinxed me.
Yeah. You know, as being as far removed from it as we are now, I can joke about it. But I looked over at him after about 30 seconds of silence. I said, "This is your fault. You know that."
Yeah.
And
poor Mike.
Yeah. But he was there, you know, trying to be a comfort to all of us. The mom had shown up. She was around the corner on the phone with him. And so he was there with her, trying to be a comfort to her. And it was looking back on it, I was really lucky to have him there that night, just to kind of not be by myself, because, you know, at the end of the day, I was in a shooting and now a guy's dead. Like, that's not an easy thing to sit with by yourself.
No, and per the protocol, we usually have like a companion officer. Did you ultimately get a companion officer? Did Chaplain Middlebrook stay with you?
Yeah, he pretty much stayed with me the whole night.
And you didn't get another officer? Like,
I didn't, honestly. Yeah, per the protocol, you get one. I didn't actually ask for one because Mike was
because he was there with you.
Yeah,
okay.
he was there, and I didn't feel like because he was there that I needed another officer. He did a great job that night. He was very calm, very calming. He was a good calming influence on a lot of folks that night.
Mike's a good dude. How old were you then when this happened?
So that was 2009. You're making me do math. I was 27, I think.
Okay. So as far as, you know, every time there's an officer involved shooting, there is a criminal investigation, and that's standard.
Yes.
And it ultimately gets presented to the grand jury, and so at the time, I can't remember in 2009 how it looked, but as far as the Dallas Psych Services, how'd that look as far as what it looked like as far as taking care of and you can be honest, taking care of the officers that were involved in something like that.
So that was a first because there were so many officers that had fired on that deal. And per the protocol, I had to go see one of the city psychs before they would let me come back. And I remember I went in, and I don't remember who it was that I saw, but I was probably in the office for less than 30 minutes. And I was, it was, he asked how I was feeling about it. I said, I'm, shot somebody. He said, well, he pointed a gun at you. That's not a lot of responses other than that to when somebody points a gun at you. And it took, maybe 30 minutes, and I was out of there. He said, you seem fine.
When you were going through like that, there is a checklist of things you have to do before you go back to the after an officer involved shooting, even going and your gun is taken away and you have to go and get a new gun and qualify. So there's a lot of things you have to do to check off a box. Did that seem like it's just another one of these things?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was. I mean, obviously they want to see, because if you're really struggling with it, there's going to be, they may make recommendations, but if you don't seem, I was young, I was still a rookie, I wanted to get back to work, so I'm also personally if I start saying I'm struggling with something, like, they're not going to let me go back to work.
And it wasn't the culture either.
No.
It goes against the culture.
Very much so. Very, very much so.
So you're encountering a guy that he was processing it himself, and you just sit there and actually watched it going from the temple to under his chin back to the temple. Just he is trying to figure out the best way to end his own life, and he ultimately decided the best way at the time the only thing he could come up with is point the gun at
the police.
Yes.
Yep.
Suicide by cop.
That's exactly what it was.
How did that make you feel of you being put in that position to carry out his plan?
It's really frustrating because you don't know if they're really going to shoot. You don't. I mean, we've all heard the stories where a guy comes up and shoots and kills a cop and is waiting for the responding officers for them to kill him. Just you just don't know, and you feel manipulated. You feel angry, frustrated, and sad because I didn't
take a life.
I didn't wake up that morning going, oh, I hope I get in a shooting today. In fact, it's exactly the opposite. Like, you go to work every day hoping you don't have to.
Nobody wants to get into a shooting.
Nobody wants to get in a shooting.
They look great on shows like Lethal Weapon and the cop shows, but they're not fun.
Yeah, they're also back to work 12 hours later, and and it's not. The very next day they're like, oh, here's an extra bullet, and it makes it look like cops take it very flippantly when they have to get in a shooting, and that's it. It doesn't feel that way at all.
So we're going to continue down this path, and I want to talk about a little unit called Metro that started up. Can you talk about it was Chief Brown's baby and how that just kind of, came to fruition?
So summer of 2012, there was a summer crime initiative, and they had a violent crime task force that was formed. I got asked to go over there and be part of that, and it was a citywide crime initiative, and they had done a bunch of these before. This was nothing new, this summer crime initiative. There were a lot of lessons, and they were very interested in asking us, and you were part of that summer one, right? Yeah. Were you there? Yeah.
I was.
So there was a bunch of us there for that summer one, but I remember them saying they were very interested in what didn't work, like what we didn't like, what we felt we needed, and that was new to me because the department didn't typically ask those questions, and so I started hearing rumors about some new task force being spun up, I went back to Northwest Patrol. I think it was end of August, beginning of September, and about November, I get a phone call. It was like, "Hey, do you want to come join this new task force?"
Who called you? Do you remember?
I think it was Tom Castro that called me.
Tom Castro.
Tom Castro called me.
Shout out Tom Castro.
Shout out to him.
Just retired.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was
I
a, he
didn't
was
know
a,
that.
he was a class behind me. He just retired in January.
He is. That is definitely a loss to the department. He is an awesome dude.
Yeah,
I would
great guy.
have followed that guy into hell. And he calls me, and he was like, "This is going to be like a big task force, 3 different shifts, and
150 officers.
Yep, 150 officers. They were working 10 to 6, 10A to 6P, 6P to 2A, and 8P to 4A. And I got asked to go to the 8P to 4A side. And I tell you, we got there. We had citywide authority. We were chasing crime trends. We were chasing wanted suspects. It's the first time I ever worked a warrant, from start to finish, just pulling the intel, looking for my sergeant. Eric Morales was my sergeant at the time. Shout out to him and to Sergeant Nash. They used to be partners. And he handed me a warrant. He goes, "Hey, can you look for this guy?" I had a detective call me, and I remember looking for him, and I don't know how deep you want me to get into the story on it.
It's your story.
I remember reading the probable cause affidavit, and this guy, he had aggravated sexual assault of a child and ag assault, deadly weapon, family violence. He had sexually assaulted the daughter of his girlfriend, who was mentally disabled, and the mom figured it out. She was nonverbal. The mom figured it out, and when she confronted him, he held a knife to her throat and threatened her, and then fled. And the detective, I guess, had what he needed, filed the warrant, and I think the warrant had been sitting there for about 6 months. And Sergeant Morales asked me to look into it, and I remember trying to chase down leads, and I didn't have anything else, so I finally called the mom and asked her about it. She goes, "Well, I think he's supposed to be in California. That's the last I heard." And I hadn't picked up on any of that. Nothing that I had found indicated he was in California. And I said, "Well, the detective will, get a hold of you if he has any questions. I'm happy to help. Let me know if there's anything I can do." And she goes, "Well, I'm trying to get just an idea of what's happening. You're the first officer that's called me." And I was like, now I'm tap dancing. I'm like, I couldn't answer her why it had taken so long for somebody to get a hold of her. And she was very emotional, very upset. But I said, I cannot promise outcomes on this. I can't promise you what's going to happen, but I can promise you effort, and I'm going to do everything I can to find this guy. And so I had talked to her that afternoon. I went into work that night at 8, and I had exhausted everything. I didn't know what I was going to do, and I just pulled up one of our databases, and I noticed there was a new entry with a new address in Dallas. And at that point, you could click on where the information had come from, like why that was there, and it had come from a moving company. And I went, I haven't seen that. Like, that just popped up like 3 days prior. And we went out there. We had covert units. Sit out there, and they went, "Hey, I think he's here." We went up and knocked on the door, and he answered. And we looked at him, and he looked at us, and Sergeant looks at him and goes, "That's him." And we grab him and take him into custody. And I remember calling Sergeant Morales, and I was like, "Hey, we got him." And he was ecstatic. And I booked him into jail. And I remember the next morning calling her and saying, "Hey, we got him last night." And she just broke down. And she was sobbing and crying. And she goes, "I was praying that y'all would find him." She goes, "I know it probably doesn't seem like much, but I'm going to be able to sleep for the first time in 6 months tonight that he's in jail." And I mean, I remember hanging the phone up, and from that moment on, I was hooked on hunting warrants.
Did you typically get that same feeling when you arrested people? Or was this one that you got more invested in?
I got more invested in this one. It was a pretty graphic probable cause affidavit, and it became kind of like that, one of those white whales that you're looking for and you just can't find them.
We have plenty of those.
Oh yeah.
A lot of times, especially early on in your career working patrol, you'll see somebody or you'll arrest somebody for a warrant, but you don't really know the entire story on it. You know, you get some pretty graphic warrants. Just the title of the offense is enough to turn your stomach, but to actually understand what's going on, to talk to the victims and then go out and arrest people, that it's rare, right? Not everybody gets an opportunity to be in a unit like that. But then once you do and you realize that, hey, I can actually help people and I can do some things here, man, that's one of the big things about this job that makes it worth it.
What really shows you the intel mining that's behind just that's beyond the normal going out answering calls and being reactive to cleaning up somebody else's messes. You're still going out and you're having to put building blocks. Your detective builds up a case for get probable cause to issue a warrant on a suspect, but then they could be in the wind for weeks, months, years, and like you said, this one little entry from a moving company kind of led you in that direction, and that's how it works. You just have to put building blocks, and you have to do a lot of work behind the scenes, and you strike out a lot too. And and you just have to keep going with the bat, keep swinging the bat, and you can, it could work out like this.
So the thing about patrol is, as rewarding as it can be, and you never know what you're going to do that day that changes somebody else's life, changes your life. But for as different as every day is, there's a lot of repetition, and you can arrest the same people. You can answer calls at the same houses, same disturbance. I mean, it's just, there's a lot of repetition, especially in a big, busy urban environment like Dallas. And you can get burned out. I know they talk about the 5-year burnout and all that stuff. But you can get burned out pretty quick. And when I went to Metro, that was kind of the culmination of everything every cop kind of wants to do, because you're not subject to going after the loud music complaints and the panhandlers and all that stuff. You're focused on bad guys. You're focused on chasing crime trends. You're being tasked with going to these areas. You might be being put in plain clothes to go do covert work to look for specific robbery crews or look for specific robbery suspects, break up robbery crews, things like that. And it was just, every day was fun. Every day was even if you were just chasing warrants every day, you were putting bad guys in jail, and they were all violent. They weren't ticket warrants. You weren't cleaning up city ticket files. You were going after violent felony offenders.
So the acronym for Metro was Measured Enforcement Targeting Repeat Offenders.
That's right.
And it was such gratifying work, man. I mean, especially the ones where you'd see on their social media, basically issuing us a challenge to catch them. You can't catch me.
Yeah.
Oh, challenge accepted. We're gonna get you.
Yep.
Chuck Young was involved in that, right?
He was, yes.
Yeah, he asked me to go to the Metro unit back whenever it was being started out southeast, but I was pretty embedded with the because Chief Elsie, I believe, also that was her.
Yes,
that was her.
that was hers.
That was her baby, and she was my deputy chief. But yeah,
Still a picture of her up on the wall in Fugitive.
Yep.
no, Tammy Elsie's amazing. That's one of my favorite chiefs to work for.
Chuck Young's pretty amazing too.
Chuck Young, shout out Chuck Young. He listens to these. Now Victoria PD Chief Chuck Young.
I'll bet
That's
he's-
right. I forgot about that.
He's still sticking his head in windows looking for bad guys too.
Oh, that guy. And let me, I want to get him on this show eventually, but that's another story altogether.
Hello.
So yeah. So Metro ended up becoming the fugitive unit.
Correct.
Okay, and you're doing this type of work, and you're seeing the challenges, but also you're seeing the great use of technology, and that you can utilize to find suspects and to find trends, and it's beyond just being directed by the soup du jour 6M or famous disturbance of the day that you have to go multiple times, or random drug house call that pops up every other day on Grand Ave.
Yeah.
So it also can help you develop niches in utilizing these tools. Did you find yourself developing a niche?
So I ended up falling into helping develop kind of the electronic surveillance side of that, like phone pings, doing stuff with social media, things like that. I became kind of adept at doing some of that. I got to work very closely with some of our federal partners. Shout out to Renee at Secret Service.
Boricua.
Shout out to Gary McDonald at the DA's office. That guy.
Oh, we've talked about Gary before. He literally is like a computer with arms and legs. He's just the most intelligent people I've ever been around.
And it was, I remember, so this kind of, the phone pings and we were always able to do that. A lot of that stayed kind of within the federal task forces. If you needed a phone ping for an emergency, you'd call Fusion. Fusion would do all that stuff.
It would be U.S. Marshal Task Force. Would be fast team would be on that. Yeah.
Yep. And the Marshals Task Force guys, they were the experts. Like they were, in many cases, had written the book on it. But I remember we'd kind of fallen in with Gary being that kind of advisor to us. And man, we just started, we started looking for these bad guys, and it seemed like every time we would develop this new technique, here'd come this new bad guy that we would be able to try this new technology on. So we got extremely good working with not just the DA's office, but our federal partners, and we had, I want to say, Fig, you could probably back me up on this. If we decided to chase you down and we employed these technologies, we had pretty much a 100% capture rate on you.
Absolutely.
And
it was amazing.
And I got very good at developing patterns of life I got very good at developing patterns of life for people looking for me. You would do that. I could historically, myself or Renee, we could put you in a building just based on your call history. It was just insane. And
I remember one time the map showed a little dot where the phone was. We pull up into the parking lot, and literally where the dot was, the bad guy was standing there.
Yep.
It was amazing.
And it was very tight. I think that one was I remember that because I was right behind you guys. We're rolling through the parking lot, and all of a sudden Fig gets on the radio and goes, "There he is," and he's standing in the middle of the parking lot, right there. And we ended up surrounding the house, and he said he was going to dive off the third story balcony, but he looked over into the field, and there was a K9 there, and he said, "I better not."
Yeah, he didn't want to jump out of the skillet into the fire.
No,
Okay, now.
no.
So just even watching you talk about this, the excitement, you're just kind of reliving euphoria of the success in this job and what it can offer, and how rewarding it feels. But also, there is a lot you have to give to this job, mentally and physically and emotionally, because it is a roller coaster.
Oh yeah.
At that point, how are you dealing with coping as far as dealing with the stress and trauma? Because you put a lot on yourself to go out and find these bad guys, and once you get success, you want more of it. You want more, and then also you actually set your own standard and also bar high. And if you don't meet that standard and bar, you get down on yourself.
Oh yeah.
And as I know the feeling, it can be very frustrating. How are you dealing with that?
It is. So we always called it tactical hide and seek, and we loved being hide and seek champs. And you're right; it's very addictive because as soon as you get that bad guy, well, now I've got.
Who's next up?
Yep, I got, and you're not just getting that there. We were assigned warrants, but we also got to pick our own warrants. So we were very we were very selective in some cases. We developed close relationships, and there were plenty of times where we were brought in almost at the beginning. We would sometimes work these cases with the case filing detectives, and you're talking to the victims. Sometimes you're talking to witnesses, and it starts to wear on you because you start to feel like you're a part of this story, and it gets. You're always putting pressure on yourself. I was always my own worst critic. I got to get this guy. I got to get this guy. I got to get this guy. And my wife always said that I had FOMO, taking days off work. I'd be.
That's fear of missing out.
Yes. Sorry. If I took a day off work, and we had, the city phone apps would start going off, I'd be getting in text threads and I'd be checking it, and she's like, you're here, be here, you're supposed to be on a day off, and you get so invested and you get so invested, I guess is the best word for it, that you can't stand not being a part of it. And I had a real struggle with letting work be at work. It didn't start out that way, but the more you're into it, oh, my guys are running this big warrant today. It's not that I didn't want to be at home, but I didn't want to miss out.
It's intoxicating.
It is. It is very intoxicating, very addictive, and on top of that, there's that nagging voice in the back of your head that, okay, so they're going to run this big warrant today. What if something goes wrong? What if something happens to one of my guys and I'm not there? Like that is the gut punch that you don't want to think about, but
it's also hard, and this is a great example of Officer Daniel Jamieson as opposed to being Daddy Jamieson or husband Jamieson, right?
Yep.
It's really hard to flip that switch and straddle that fence to pour into both sides.
Well, that's one of the things about being a cop, first responder in general too, but I think cop especially is, what do you do for a living? I work in insurance. What do you do? I do accounting work for this company. What do you do for a living? I'm a cop. I mean, that's what you are. And unfortunately, you don't get as cops, we don't turn that off when we get to the house, when we get to the restaurant when you're always sitting with your back. You know, you have to face the door. You have to sit in the back of the restaurant. You know, yeah, that's kind of cliched to say those things, but it's very real.
It's very real.
Hypervigilance is all too real.
And it doesn't start out that way, especially as a rookie. But when you've gone through enough things, you start to develop kind of the hair on the back of your neck starts to tell you, hey, something's not right, even if you can't tell what it is. And it constantly being switched on.
Well, you develop intuitive traits, just like you develop skill sets to hunt, right? And it's hard to, and like I said, you know, success is intoxicating. Success is, it makes you thirsty for more, and it's hard to think about anything but that, because I'm sure there was a lot of times when you're off work and you're with the family, and you get a call from somebody that you work with. You know, it was that FOMO. It was the fear of missing out, and it's hard to give all to the family when you really are concerned about your team, the next lead on the warrant.
Yep.
Right.
And on top of that, you know, as a detective, you know, yes, you're off, but you're not off. And so when, you know, DPD being so big, I'm sure it's this way at smaller departments too, but especially at DPD, you know, the homicide detectives had no idea that I was off that day. There's not an email chain that goes out. So I'd be, you know, at lunch with my family, and I get a homicide detective call my city phone, because even when you're off, you're carrying your city phone around, because you never know what's going to happen. You may have to come in, and
which happened plenty of times.
And so now when you're supposed to be with your family, you're talking about a homicide that happened 5 hours ago, and well, I'm not at work today. How about you call Fig? And I know he's at work, you know, and then there's the thing of they're about to run a homicide warrant. You got the call, but you're at home. Now Fig's going to go run the homicide warrant, and there's that FOMO. And it's frustrating because, you know, as a dad, as a husband, you know, in your head, you're wanting to be there, and it's like that elastic rubber band constantly pulling you back, and you're fighting against it. And it gets not just frustrating for me, but for, you know, my wife, for my kids. You know, Daddy, do you have to go to work? Unfortunately, yes. You know,
I want to get into a date that's really just, it's always going to haunt this city. July 7th, 2016. Can you walk us through your day from your perspective?
So that was a really interesting time in the country for the narrative. I mean, we had Ferguson, we had the Philando Castile shooting, and there was protests all the time. I don't remember what the frequency was in Dallas, but it was certainly probably 2 or 3 a week. And police brutality protests. I'm sure you know that better than anybody. But we were, you know, as Metro, because we were still Metro at the time. A specialized unit there. We were, I don't want to say we were at every protest, but we were at a lot of them. And
we're always on standby.
Yeah,
for
we
sure.
were always on standby. And oddly enough, the night before, my wife had been texting back and forth through social media with some people that we knew, and they were having kind of a heated conversation, heated argument. Nobody was listening to anybody. She was trying to get her point across about how dangerous things were and how she was worried about me, and it just wasn't going well. And I was like, just stop. And she was so frustrated, and she was scared. And that night she was like, I know something bad is going to happen. I can just feel it. And I was like, it's fine. Don't worry about it. You know, we get to work that day, and it was just a day. I mean, we were out doing what we normally did. We were up in Northeast covering some guys. One of my partners, arrested some gangbangers, and my partner I was riding with that day, Zach, he and I took the guns that we found in the car, and we said, hey, we'll take them to the property room, book them in for you, don't worry about it. And while we were kind of heading that way to the property room, I'm messaging with a friend of mine, and she sends me a message. She goes, I want to go to the protest tonight, but I'm kind of scared. And I said, what protest? And she says, well, there's a protest tonight. And, she was afraid that either the police were going to overreact or something bad was going to happen. And there had been plenty of CNN, Fox News stories.
Just building it up.
Yep. And you could see that, the protests were getting kind of violent. And she was very afraid that, something was going to happen. And I said, hey, Dallas has, for all of our faults, Dallas has a pretty good reputation about handling business. You shouldn't worry about anything like that. You'll be fine. I still have those messages. My partner and I get to the property room, and we're doing what you do at the property room. We're seeing buddies we haven't seen in weeks or months. We're BSing with people there, and we are there with some Channel 1 officers that we didn't know. They just happened to have their radio on, and you hear the tone come out, and they say, I need elements at Market and Lamar. We have shots fired, officer down. And we look up, and the lieutenant who's there at the property room just looks at us and goes, go, just go. And, that day, Zach is driving that day. I don't know how he threaded the needle, but he was probably doing 70, 80 miles an hour down Elm Street, heading that way. And we had switched the radio to Channel 1, and it was just chaos. You were there. I can't describe, we were hearing reports of snipers,
multiple shooters, garages, and they just didn't know.
And we were hearing calls about more officers going down. And I remember thinking, like, it can't be what I'm hearing on the radio. And we pull up to Elm and Lamar, and Zach stops, and he's hollering. He's like, which way do we go? Left or straight? Left or straight, which way? And I go left. I'm looking, and as soon as we pull the car around the corner, there's officers laying in the middle of the street. And both of us at the same time just go, oh my God. And we pull up right there in front of what turned out to be the suspect car, and bailed out. And Zach goes to one of the downed officers, and I laser in on another group of officers trying to load an officer into the back of a squad car. And I jump in, and I'm starting to try to pull him in. And I think at one point I'm like, hey, help me out. Because I didn't realize that he couldn't. And we're working to get him in. And finally I grab him by where his vest is, and I pull him in. And I fall back, and his head lands in my lap. And I look down, and I go, oh, shit, I know him. And it was Patrick Zamaripa. And I look down at him, and the doors start to close, and I can't remember his name now. Sergeant jumps in the front seat and starts to try to drive off, and I look down at Patrick, and was gone. Now, looking back, he was gone. At the time, I started doing CPR. I started talking to him, and just, saying, please don't die. Please don't die on me. Talking to him. And we made it from where we were to the ER at Parkland. It's a long time when you're doing CPR. Seemed like a lot longer, but less than 5 minutes. I mean, he drove the wheels off that car, getting us up there. I know we were doing probably 100, 115 miles an hour, northbound 35. Certainly over 100, 115 easy. And I remember pulling into the ambulance bay and just screaming, like, hey, we need, get somebody out here. And they were as surprised that we were there as we were to be there. But that it was like ants coming out of an anthill. The way people came out of there, they grabbed him and put him on a stretcher and wheeled him in. And I was standing there just in shock. Like I didn't know what to do. And then more officers came in, and they didn't stop. And some were wounded, and I remember seeing them wheel an officer past, and I said, "Who's that?" And one of my buddies, Bo McCluskey, who works for McKinney PD now, was there, and he said, "It's Mike Kroll." And I pretty much lost it there. I watched them call Patrick, and I watched them call Mike. And I remember that night, I reached down to try to call my wife, and I went, "Where's my cell phone?" I'd left my cell phone at the property room when we ran out. And I was at the nurse's station. I said, I need a phone. Do y'all have a phone? And they were like, use that one. And I called my wife's number, knowing that she's probably not going to answer when she doesn't recognize the number. So I called her again and again and again. And it dawned on me about the fourth time I called her that her caller ID app was probably registering Parkland Hospital. And she answered the phone, and I said, it's not me. I'm not hurt. And she said, what are you talking about? She hadn't turned the news on yet. She didn't know. And I told her, and she kept asking, you're at the hospital. Are you sure you're not shot? And I said, I'm sure I'm not shot. And I remember being on the phone with her, and I couldn't figure out. It's the weird thing that your brain focuses in on. I was like, there is something wrong with my pants. Like, what is going on? I kept kicking, like the cuff of my pants kept getting stuck in my boots. I'm like, what is going on? And I'm on the phone with my wife, and I reach down to adjust my pants, and I pull it back, and they're completely soaked with blood. I didn't even know that. From probably about my knees were just completely soaked. And I was just standing there on the phone with my wife and looking at my hand that was covered in blood. And she was like, what are you going to do? I said, I don't know. I'm here. We don't know what's going on. At the time, we thought it was multiple shooters. I said, I don't know where Zach is. Zach was loading. Actually, he loaded Mike into a squad car, and he got transported. He loaded him into our squad car, actually. And I thought Zach was coming, and he wasn't there. And my partner was still out in the field, and I was, just there. And I had to go do I guess, what do you call it? Give a statement at SIU. Capers was just
They're overwhelmed.
It was. I've never seen anything like that before or since. And I remember it was Casey Shelton who took my statement, and the lieutenant who was there, told me, he was like, well, after I'd given my statement and done all that, he was like, okay, go home. And I was like, my guys are still out there. Like, I started to walk to my car, and I called Nash. Nash was off that day and came in, and I called him, and I said, where are you? And he sent somebody to come pick me up. And we went down there, and I found Zach. John Tutt was down there. He was working an off-duty job and responded. I got to tell him about Mikey. And he took that about as well as you could expect. We were there. I don't know how long we were there. I mean, it was a few more hours, and we were just
the longest night of my career.
Yeah.
Of all of our careers.
Yeah. I didn't even know where you guys were. I had no idea what y'all had done with Brent. That was very, numbing. Like, so much is happening. Like, your brain just goes into survival mode, and you're putting one foot in front of the other. We were very concerned. At least those of us that were down there. I mean, I'd been to the hospital. I hadn't gotten, the radios weren't working inside the ER. I didn't know probably half of what everybody else out there knew. But to me, there's still more shooters out there, right? Like, we don't know. The 7-Eleven's getting looted. That's where we were standing. That was a very antagonistic crowd. We were worried about something starting up there. And I remember the radio coming alive, and they say, hey, something's about to happen. Just everybody just be prepared for, nobody shoot into the building. We were waiting, and all of a sudden we hear this boom. And I went, that's not a flashbang. I don't know what that is, but that was not a flashbang. And a few minutes later, they called the area secure, and we got relieved to go home. And I remember just driving home, and hands at 9 and 3, just driving, no sound, no nothing, and just kind of in shock. And I remember making it home and having to leave my boots outside and walk into the utility room to take off my uniform because it was covered in blood. And I walked through to the bedroom, and I started to take off my vest, and the Velcro coming undone woke my wife up. And she got up and she hugged me. And I've been with her now 21 years. And she's never hugged me like that before or since. She was saying, I'm so glad. I'm so sorry, but I'm so glad. She, I guess, hadn't really been sleeping. She finally went to sleep, and I went and sat in the living room in the dark, and I remember just sitting there breaking down crying. Like, I didn't know what else to do. And probably about 4 in the morning, 5 in the morning, I finally went to bed. And got up the next day. Had to be at work at 3.
Daniel, you got to go back to work at 3 o'clock on 7/8. How'd that feel?
Surreal. Not gonna lie, I was a little scared. But I remember getting up, having coffee. Obviously, I slept in a little bit. And my wife comes in and sees me getting dressed and starts tearing up. And she comes over, and by this point, I think I've got everything but the gun belt on. And she hugs me and starts crying, and she starts begging, please don't go. Please don't go. Please stay here. And I remember just saying, I have to. Like, I couldn't not go. There was a lot. There was a lot of things that were said about the days after 7/7. One of the things Chief Brown said at the time was that everybody showed up to work on 7/8. I don't think that was an exaggeration. I think everybody showed up on 7/8. And I remember coming in, we were kind of like zombies. And we sat down, and Chuck Young, shout out to Chuck, was there. What do you say? I mean, what do you tell your troops after something like that? I mean, the full weight of everything still hadn't kind of leveled out yet. We were still processing. I mean, that scene was processed for what, 5 days? Something like that. We still didn't have the whole story. And I don't even remember exactly what he said. I remember it being,
We were all in a daze, man.
Yeah.
I mean, everything's a blur.
but they had us go and provide kind of security at the Southwest substation. They had lost the most guys, and we were there doing that so that they could, the patrol guys down there could be
Mourn.
Yeah, be able to mourn and be there for each other. And so on the 8th, we were doing security there, and then on the 9th, they had we came in, and I remember, was it Chief Humphrey came in and asked who all has heavy vests and helmets, and we were looking at each other like, some of us do, not everybody. And that was the day headquarters got locked down because they had a confirmed threat on headquarters
And reports of someone in the garage.
Yep, I was there. We were clearing the garages.
Yep.
And then yeah.
How are you taking care of yourself? I mean, looking back now, and you've got several years to revisit that and look at how you were going. There's some critical incidents we haven't even talked about, and then we're on set. We're just leaving 7/7 right now.
Yeah.
Looking back, how are you taking care of yourself from a emotional, mental, physical standpoint?
I was just pushing through. I was probably not too long after that started drinking more. I mean, I always drank, but more, I think,
After 7/7?
Not immediately after, but as the common analogy is the frog in the boiling pot of water. I think probably 7/7 was the spark that lit the gas underneath it. It didn't start the water boiling. It just turned the heat on. And that was just. I remember a lot of times just being like wanting to be there, wanting to be present in whatever it was I was doing, and there were times I was just in a fog. I watched. It's been a few weeks now, but American Sniper. There's a scene in that movie where Bradley Cooper's playing Chris Kyle, and he's back from deployment. And he's got kids, and his kids are playing, and I can't remember. He may or may not have a beer in his hand. I don't remember what it is. But he's sitting there, and the camera pans around, and he's just sitting in his chair, just staring, and the TV starts to come into view, and he's just staring at the TV. The TV's turned off. He's just staring, and I saw that, and I was like, man, that's a little too real. It wasn't all the time, but there were times when I would just be not there.
Did a drinking help?
Well, that's the sinister thing about alcohol is it works until it doesn't. But it did a little. As much of it was habit. I'd get home and have a drink, have a beer. It became an effective habit at certain points. And at that point I wasn't drinking a lot. It was.
How was it effective? What was it that you were looking for?
There came a point where, and I don't know how else to describe this, but your brain gets really loud. Not like hearing voices or anything like that, but it's just it's
the thoughts.
Yeah, it's just loud and you can't turn it off, and it works to kind of quiet some of that down. And you're stressed and you're just amped and just you start to. It works. It de-stresses you some and
Numbs you.
Yeah, and sometimes that's what you're. Sometimes it's not that you don't feel anything; it's that you feel too much, and you just. It's not that you don't want to feel it; it's that you don't want to feel it as intensely as you are.
Like the euphoria and the success of the job, the other side of the job that could lead to other addictions.
Yeah,
and you're wanting that feeling of being numb because it helps with the pain.
Mm-hmm.
We're moving on through this timeline because we are building up to, yes, folks, another critical incident in this man's career. We're going to take you back to February 2021. Big T Bazaar. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us about that?
So we had been tasked with locating this particularly violent gang member, and he had pulled out a revolver and an AK-47 on somebody, threatened to kill him. And when you pulled up this guy's history, he was one of those 1%ers. He was a legitimately bad dude, and we located his house. They were going to want to run search warrants on it. It was turning into a big deal, and SWAT was going to hit the house.
Then a baby comes out. And puts the brakes on that. I mean, SWAT's not gonna
SWAT's not going to hit the house, gas it, do all that stuff with a baby in there. That was a no-go, and we all knew it. So we all got up early the next morning. We had coverts sitting all night watching it in case they could get him. We come in early the next morning, stage up, and he ends up getting mobile in a car. We're following him, and he drives out to the Big T Bazaar, and we get an opportunity to do what we called a high-risk apprehension on him.
Can you describe that real quick for the listener that may not know what that is?
So HRAs, we would be in a smooth covert car, an SUV, and we were all typically in plain clothes, but we would mark up and have markings. We would have heavy vests. We were very clearly police when we jumped out, and we would, if you were on a vehicle, or in this case he was a pedestrian, we would pull up alongside and jump out, identify ourselves, and take him into custody. And that was not it wasn't an uncommon practice, but we didn't do it for just anybody. Like you know, just because you had a felony warrant doesn't mean you were getting an HRA on you. It had to be
special kind of piece of shit.
You had to be likely armed and intent on resisting or fleeing, and we knew him to be armed. That it was very likely he was going to be. He was always, the intelligence we had. He always had guns, and not just guns, but long guns. So we gear up and set up for this HRA, and he comes walking out of this store, and as we're pulling up, he kind of looks at the car as it's coming, and he ended up transitioning his hand to his coat pocket, and as we pull alongside, the doors start to come open. I'm in the
Seat 3.
Seat 3. So seat 3 is the rear driver's side. So I'm sitting right behind the driver. And my job in that HRA is to be support. So on the passenger side, seat 2 was Fig, and my partner Kim Howard was in seat 4 right behind him.
And driver
was Dan Russell, who you may or may not know.
I know him a little.
So we're all in the car, and as my door's coming open and my foot's coming out, I hear a pop, and I know they're shouting Dallas Police. And you hear a pop, and I went, "That's not a rifle." We all had rifles, and by the time I get around to that side of the car, I didn't see what happened initially, but he was on the ground, and I had heard rifle fire going off as I'm coming around the car, and it turns out it was Fig returning fire. The guy had shot at us, and we ended up getting him into custody. Fig showed tremendous restraint in that situation, and the guy survived the encounter.
He flipped over the
He
hood of
did.
the car and
He did.
matrixed my shot.
Mm-hmm. He almost didn't make it out of that. But as things were calming down, I looked over, and there is a very distinct divot in the car door. And where his first shot landed was on the door frame of the door, and it actually, when it impacted, pushed the door back into Kim. And if he'd have been, what do you say, Fig, 2 inches, 3 inches more to the right, he would have either hit Kim in the shoulder or he would have shot me in the head where I was. So that's a little closer than I like my incoming fire. And that was, again, it was one of those pucker factor moments where you realize that could have been a really bad day really quick.
You've had a lot of pucker factors going back to 2009 on Masita.
Mm-hmm.
And then here we are in February 2021 at the POS Bruton Big T, or the Big T Bazaar.
Mm-hmm.
And you, going back to 7/7, you watch five fellow officers lose their life and also several others injured.
Mm-hmm.
And then 2021, it was that close, it was that close where you almost lost your life. I've talked before about this job being like concrete pouring on your shoulders every year, and it just gets heavier and heavier. And you talked about the escalation and drinking to cope and also to numb. And that is a horrible side effect of trauma and trying to cope with trauma. And you've literally had a lifetime of it in this profession. At that point in 2021, how were you, and after going through this shooting, what did it look like for you then, as far as, again, I'm going back to caring for yourself, and I want to talk about where you were as far as what coping mechanisms were you using at that point?
So I was trying to immerse myself in being there for my kids, being at home. Hindsight being what it is, I wasn't doing a very good job of it. The desire to do that, the desire to be present at home was incredibly strong. But at the time, you don't know what you don't know, right? And so because you don't know what you don't know, I didn't understand what the symptoms I didn't understand what symptoms to look for, right? I didn't understand that it taking an act of Congress for me to want to go mow the lawn, or just not being able to sleep, and everybody in this job has the nightmares. The standard one of you firing your gun and the bullets bouncing off the bad guy, stuff like that. I mean, everybody has
the trigger
those.
won't pull.
Yep.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. But it was just, it was probably not too long after that I started to kind of think something's not right. Like, again, the frog in the boiling pot of water. It doesn't know the water's boiling till it's too late. The water may not have been boiling yet, but it was hot. And I just, it wasn't that there was an increase in drinking. It just kept going. And again, it's a really poor coping mechanism because, when you're trying to do that because you can't sleep, well, it screws up your sleep even worse. All of this stuff becomes the snake eating its own tail. And I remember one of the things that stuck with me prior to all this, my wife and I were watching TV. We were in the living room. And we were watching a comedy special. I forget who it was, but they said something funny, and I laughed. Like, I remember going, "Oh, that's hysterical." And my wife's looking at me. She goes, "What?" And I said, I'm looking at her confused, like, "What are you talking about?" She goes, "That was funny." I said, "I laughed." She goes, "No, you didn't." She goes, you never laugh anymore." And I was like, ouch.
Void of emotion.
Yeah. And it was that I thought it was funny. To me, I laughed. But to the outside world, with what she was seeing, I was not laughing. And that was kind of the beginning of me going, because she started saying, laugh, at one point she came into the room and she goes, "Where are you?" Here? "No, you're not." And I, as in many things in my life, it's taken my wife putting her foot in my backside to get me to realize something. And about that time, I started thinking, maybe I have depression. And I said that to my wife one day, and she goes, fucking duh. I'm like, okay. Ouch again.
And at that time on the department, it still wasn't widely talked about, and
Oh,
there
no.
wasn't a lot of education on that subject.
Nothing outside of the box check at Corps. You know, you would go, and it's not that the people that came in didn't care about it, but it's a 2-hour block, maybe an hour at Corps, because they need to fill it, or maybe TCOL requires it. You know, it's not that, and I'm sure the people that came in that wanted to talk about it probably would have loved to have had a whole day or a week, or, you know, to do real classes.
But it was just another class.
It was just another class. And on top of that, you know, I mean, we're cops, we're type A personalities. You know, you would sit there and listen to them talk about, you know, situations with other first responders from not at DPD, but other agencies. And you were like, well, I'm glad none of that's happening to me.
But you're that frog in that bowl of water.
Mm-hmm. And because for those people, the water already boiled, and, you know, things have already happened to them. It hasn't happened to me yet. So, good thing I'm not that guy.
Or Daniel, speaking of that bowl in water, and you're in it and you don't realize it.
Mm-hmm.
I want to take you back to May 25th, 2022, when it hit a boiling point.
Mm-hmm. So that was Memorial Day weekend. And we had gotten invited to go to a Memorial Day party. And got there, everybody was having a good time, kids were having a good time. And we ended up, you know, doing what you do on Memorial Day, which is be out by the pool, drinking like I did on my day off. And the party was at a country club, and there was like a defined beginning and end to it, right? And so we were there, party wound down, and we were going to have some friends come back to our house. And I'd been drinking a fair amount. And when we went home, my wife was like, "You don't need to be driving." So she drove home with us there. We get there, and I realized that we didn't have what I wanted. And so I decided that I was going to go run around the corner to the store, get what we needed. And my wife was like, "Are you good? Like, are you good to drive?" And I said, "No, I'm fine." Because I didn't honestly, truly believe that I was drunk. I really didn't. And I got on my way down there to the store. I guess I was weaving pretty good, because a citizen called in and said that I was weaving. And when I got to the store, I realized, well, shit, I forgot my wallet. I'd left it in the beach bag. You know, I didn't have it with me, so I'd forgotten to pull it out. So I was going to drive back home, and I didn't realize it, but police had been waiting on me. And I got out on the street, and they pulled me over, and they said somebody had called in on me. Long story short, I was arrested for DWI.
Going back to them pulling you over,
Mm-hmm.
did that fear, instant fear, just hit? Did you realize that you?
I knew what time it was. I mean, it was when you're a cop, you know what it's like when the cop car's behind you, it's about to pull you over because you've been in that cop car so many times.
Bumper lock
Yep.
you and
Mhm. Yeah. So it was not like, oh, there's a police car behind me. Like, I could tell. I got pulled over, and it was. I knew it. I mean, I knew what was going to happen.
what was going through your mind?
I'm done. Like, this is the end of my career. I'm about to go to jail, involuntarily go to jail. Not used to that. Just the tornado of, the life that you have. That tornado's coming at you there, and your life and career and everything is the lone trailer sitting in the field, and it's coming right at you. And that's exactly what happened. It just hit it, and vaporized it. Everything was gone.
Did you realize that you were that drunk, though, whenever the cuffs went on?
No. Looking back, I was probably I was getting drunker, right? Like, I hadn't
Peaked yet.
yeah.
You're on your way up.
Yep. So, I'd get arrested. They go down, get a blood draw warrant, and book me into Collin County Jail, which is about as much fun as you can imagine it being.
Being on the other end
Yeah.
of that, and there's so many unknowns.
Oh, yeah.
With everything.
I mean, you give, you always hear the advice, you always give advice, but when it's happening to you, like, the entire time, I just kept thinking, like, this has to be a dream. This isn't real. This isn't happening. I remember, being asleep in, like, the little cell area that they had me in. I was by myself, and I remember being asleep, and I woke up 2 or 3 times, and every time I woke up, I thought, oh, thank God, I'm here, and then my eyes would open, and I'd realize I'm still there. That, while 7/7 was the longest night of my professional life, that was the longest night of my life. Just realizing, that, I knew everything was over at that point. 15 years almost, 14 and a half or so at that point, something like that. Just gone.
By just a night of...
Mm-hmm. And the thing is that, like, I didn't do that. Right. Looking back, that wasn't something I did. We didn't go out and drink. Mostly because it was too expensive to go out to drink. Why not just stay at home? It's safer. It's easier. I don't have to worry about wearing pants. I can do what you're at home. But it took a while for me to start to understand why my brain said, no, you're good. You're good. It's fine. It's fine.
What was that?
Again, getting back to not knowing what you don't know. And after going through and realizing that I had getting diagnosed with PTS and all that, your brain needing that stimulation and the risk taking and just being reckless about things. When you get motivated to do something, you're not doing things the right way. And it's just, and your brain just skips over those steps. and the speed bumps that you build yourself. You know, I'm not going to do this. This isn't okay. You know, this is a hard line. They start to get smaller, start to get torn down, and you know, you're doing things, you know, and thank God that I didn't run into anybody that night. Thank God I didn't hurt anybody, because I could have. I mean, I got very, for as unlucky as I was, I got very lucky that night. You know, it was the stupidest decision I could have ever made. I mean, hands down. I can't imagine a stupider decision to make. And cost me.
So these deals have ramifications past just you, right?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, as a father, as a husband, how do you think that affected the rest of your family?
My wife, God bless her, I say, you know, despite my best effort, she refuses to leave me. You know, she knew something was wrong. Again, she didn't know what. But she was basically, you know, all right, we're going to get through this. Like, we're going to, you know, what's the next step? She's always been my biggest supporter, my cheerleader, even when I didn't deserve it. But, you know, for me, it was, you know, my kids. My son is just, he was, you know, Daddy being a police officer, holy crap. Like, that was everything. If I brought home, you know, our take-home cars or whatever with the lights, I have pictures of him sitting in my garage, just sitting in the car with the lights on. And he would just sit in there and, you know, want to watch his phone or play a game or something, just sit in the squad car, not the squad car, but the take-home car with the lights in it. And if I happen to bring a squad car home, and to see the look on his face when he finally realized that Daddy wasn't going to be a police anymore, that was fucking hard. You know, they were young, so they didn't quite understand it. My oldest was old enough to understand what happened. That sucked. You know, they've had to watch me go through all of this. And, you know, it's been not just emotionally, you know, hard on them, but, you know, you lose a good steady job, you know, they want to do things and we can't do it now. And you know, they're the ones, you know, for me, I understand why I have to go through it. Like, I get that. I spent, you know, for me, I spent an entire career holding people accountable. What kind of an example am I to my kids if I don't hold myself accountable? But, you know, what sucked the most was knowing that they were going to suffer too, and they didn't deserve it because of my dumbass decisions. That's one of the hardest things that I've continually had to deal with on this, is just, you know, people that, and my wife too, you know, everybody suffered because of that.
When it's also going into, like, heroes have flaws and heroes have weaknesses.
Yeah. You're
their hero.
Yeah. And, you know, it sucks to watch your, you know, what do they say? Don't meet your heroes. You know, my son still, will, you know, he still asks, you know, will you you ever going to be a police officer again? And I'm like, no, sorry. But he still talks about, that's still, my daddy was a police officer, and that was, yeah.
Your biggest, this whole thing from this incident in 2022, there's an unfolding of a process.
Oh, yeah.
And, we see it for other people that we've actually put in jail and gone in prepared for court with. And you would hope that some of them, more than likely, they had their own support group. Who was your support group when this was unfolding for you?
So Fig was there. Dan Russell was there. His wife was there. Lots of friends. My folks were there. It's, all the guys, most of the guys from Fugitive, talk to you. It sucks because, it's not supposed to happen, right? Like, that's not how this is supposed to end. Like, I'm supposed to do 25, 30 years, and I got a beach somewhere that I'm going to, drink a beer with Fig on the beach in Puerto Rico or something like that when we're retired. Like, that's what's supposed to happen. It's not supposed to, we're supposed to go chase bad guys and promote and, go do something else. That's what we're supposed to do. It's not supposed to end like this. And these guys, I let every one of them down. I let Fig down, let you down. Because that's not supposed to happen. And I remember sitting there, with Fig or Dan or getting people reaching out, like not feeling like I deserved that support because, what's the worst thing I could do at this? I mean, this is one of the worst things I could do. I violated, their trust, my family's trust. I had lots of friends. But I'll tell you, at the time, I really didn't feel like I deserved what they were, the help and the love they were offering.
If one of those friends had come to you and said, hey, you got a problem right now, you need to get some help, would you have listened to that, or were you at that point yet?
I've spent a lot of time thinking about that. I would like to think that I would have. But, again, unfortunately, we have this conversation with the benefit of hindsight, right? Nobody, including me, had any idea how deep this went, how bad off things were. Drinking as a symptom is, self-medicating. It's not what's the word I'm looking for? It's not the only thing. It's just an example. It's just an indicator of a bigger problem. And it's not how much or how little you're drinking, how often you're drinking. It's why you're drinking. It's not, you can drink once a week and be an alcoholic. It's not, and you can drink every day and not be an alcoholic. It's not that you're drinking, it's why you're drinking. And for me, I was seeking help for, depression, possibly some anxiety, prior to May 25th. And the therapist that I was seeing was like, oh, you might have some post-traumatic stress in there too. I knew something was wrong. I just didn't quite know what and how bad it was. And of course, unfortunately, May 25th had to happen for me to kind of put that into perspective. And it wasn't even immediately after that. Like, it still took a little bit of time for me to kind of put those pieces together.
You were seeing a therapist before this happened?
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel like that might have helped a little bit, or do you expound on that a little bit?
It certainly didn't hurt. Joe, I liked what you said. Finding a therapist is kind of like dating. You might not click with one. The one I was seeing before was fine. Wasn't bad at what they were doing, and just I don't feel like they were, that they were specialized for me. Like I was something I think that they probably weren't used to seeing, and they didn't know what questions to ask, where to go with me, and that became, I kept saying, oh, well, I don't know that I feel any different, but, give it time. It's not, even then I knew it. Well, this doesn't change overnight. Like, you can't go to therapy. You can't, take a pill and, okay, well, it's going to be, you're fixed tomorrow. No, it doesn't work that way. Even I knew that. So.
Why did you start going?
When I went back and going back to what I said told my wife, I said, I think I might have some depression. She goes, fucking duh. I was like, okay, well, let me go start seeing somebody to, see what they say. And they were like, okay, well, maybe you should try talking to your doctor about getting on an antidepressant. And I tried that. And, again, we have these conversations with the benefit of hindsight. I got put on a starter dose of an antidepressant. It just wasn't enough, I didn't know if I was any better. And I continued that kind of through and after May 25th. And I remember, when would it have been? Probably July. We were just in kind of holding pattern, with, the case and the profession and all that. Like, I was still on administrative leave. They hadn't even, I don't even think they'd gotten the blood work back yet. And I was having a conversation with my wife one day, and I said, do you think I'm doing better? You think this medicine's working? She looks at me, she goes, no. I was like, oh, ouch. Thanks. But I've learned over the course of my 21 years with her, that, she'll tell me what I need to hear, not necessarily what I want to hear. And, I remember, I think I texted Dan. I was probably texting you, Fig, too, at the time. And I was like, I don't think this is working, right? Like, I don't know. And again, with the benefit of hindsight, I was probably getting worse, because there was the added stress, right?
Added uncertainty.
And it was getting worse.
Can you talk about 3FTL and how that got going?
So that's because of you. I was texting with Dan one day, and I get a text from him. It says, this is from Joe King. And there was a couple of different services that were on there, but 3FTL was the top one, with kind of the recommendation of, hey, these guys really know what they're doing. And I remember the week before my birthday, actually, I called and I texted Jennifer over at 3FTL. And I talked to her on the phone, and I was like, look, I don't know what's going on. I know something's wrong at this point. Obviously, we have new things that have popped up that are good indicators that something is wrong. But I don't know. Maybe I have some PTS. She kind of chuckled a little bit, and
So there's no maybe to it.
she said, "If you've worked in a urban environment like Dallas for more than 6 months, I guarantee you have some of it, at least on some level." And she scheduled a meeting for me on Monday. That next Monday, I went in and saw her, and it was very interesting because she is so she like vibrates energy, and to have that kind of that intense personality that she has be as calming as she is. I walk up and she's like, "Hi, I'm Jen," and I go to shake her hand, and she goes, "No, I'm a hugger." I'm like, "Oh, okay, we're doing this." And I thought I was there to kind of like, I didn't know what to expect. I thought I was there for like a consult, and she was like, "All right, this is what we're gonna do." And she's like, "We're gonna do this. We're gonna take your blood. We're gonna check all these things. I'm gonna set you up with this counselor. I have a list of counselors that are phenomenal. We've had them all ourselves." And I'm like, "Oh, so this is happening?" And she goes, "Yeah, this is happening." And
That treadmill had been turned on.
Oh yeah,
It was going.
Yep.
So the hardest part was probably deciding, hey, I need to call these people, and everything else from there got real easy.
Well, I wouldn't say easy.
I mean,
but
the process of getting started.
It was. There were a lot of things that she would ask me questions about. Well, how do you feel about this, or how's this? How's your sleep? Is this happening when you sleep? And I'm like, yeah. And she's like, okay. And I was. She was like, I hear this all the time. And that was kind of the big thing that I kind of realized was how lonely you get isolated. Literally overnight, I was isolated from virtually every friend I had.
Your identity was taken.
Mm-hmm. And it's very, very lonely. So I was in a house surrounded by my wife and children, and I was completely alone. And it's not a good feeling. And Jen was very, very emphatic. There's these things, you can go to these groups with other first responders. She goes, anybody you talk to is going to know what you're going through. This is you are not alone. And that was very, it was really important. I think I've been lucky in life of ending up in situations where I get what I need right when I need it, and that was one of those situations where I kind of landed with 3FTL right when I needed them. And I mean, they were doing everything there. Everything was in-house. They were, checking hormone levels. It's where I learned about, the sort of cycle of how important sleep is, how important, not just sleep, good sleep, your hormone levels, and how stress, PTS, but not just PTS, but stress in general, what happens to your body when you're bathed, when you're just constantly taking cortisol baths, what that does to all your other hormone levels, and how cyclical that becomes, and the circle just gets tighter and tighter, and like the snake eats its own tail because you're stressed and you're drinking. Well, that screws with your hormone levels, which get lower. So all that becomes your hormone levels get lower. You start to feel bad, so you might drink a little more. You don't sleep, so you feel worse, and everything is just it's never ending, and the pressure just gets more and more until something finally breaks. And I had no idea,
What did you learn most about yourself?
Wow. That it was like hunting bad guys. You got to have the right intel. You got to have the right training. Yeah, I mean, you might get lucky finding them once in a while, but it becomes a skill, right? You got to know what tactics to employ when. So I defaulted to learning how to do that. About, the biggest takeaway for me was, they were like, they said your hormone levels are a little off. And I remember calling Fig and telling him about it, and he asked what my levels were, and I told him, and his words were, "Bro, how did you get out of bed in the morning?" And I said, "It's kind of hard." And it's like puzzle pieces, right? You put one in there, and that shows you the shape for the next one that you need to put in there. And so when I got hooked up with my therapist, Renee, shout out to Renee, and Jen was telling me about her. She was like, "I think she's going to be great for you." I went in there, and she told me that she specialized in something called EMDR. For her, the more accurate was ART, which is accelerated resolution therapy. And she was explaining it to me, and I think I had a look on my face like, is this for real? Like, is this really going to work? And I remember trying it. We did our first session. Our first couple of sessions that we didn't do that. She kind of got to know me and know my story. She took a lot of notes. The first session we did, I remember I got home and I had the worst headache. I was like, "Oh, is this what it's going to be like every time?" And I walked in the next time. She goes, "No, it goes away after 2 or 3. So about the third one, I didn't have them anymore. But about the third one, I started to notice that the ART coupled with, appropriately adjusted meds, being on hormone therapies, with all my levels getting corrected. Now I'm sleeping, not having the nightmares anymore. And I remember, I don't know if you remember it, but I remember calling you and going, "Bro, is this what normal feels like?"
Yeah, I remember that.
I was like, I haven't felt like this in a decade. Like, and I mean, obviously 10 years prior, it wasn't as bad, but I was, I didn't know what I didn't know. And going down through all that and learning what the puzzle pieces are supposed to look like and how they fit together. I remember just sitting there one time. I was probably the same conversation. I said, "I wish I'd known this 5 years ago."
So finding that counselor with 3FTL compared to who you were seeing before.
Yeah, that made a difference. It really did. And personality wise, like, I didn't get away with anything, which I guess is what I need.
She read right through your bullshit.
Oh yeah. It's almost like she knows what she's doing. And so, but she really knew. I mean, she really knew what she was doing. And I remember that she said the standard course of therapy for that's like up to 12. And she goes, "But most people never need 12." And we stopped doing the ART after seven sessions. I was like, I had no idea that I felt as bad as I did. You know, looking back down the road, I'm just like shaking my head.
Did you find it reassuring or otherwise that they can basically look at you and listen to what you say and they're like, we've seen this before?
So I found that very reassuring, that it wasn't, and the fact that, you know, the people, whether it's Jen, whether it's Renee, or you know, some of the guys that when I would go to like a group session or something like that, and there'd be other first responders, which I found funny. I was always the only cop in there. Everybody else was firefighters. But they could describe what I was feeling. They could describe what I was. They could pretty much say what I was going to say. Like my next sentence, they already knew what I was going to say
Because they've been there.
Yeah, and that was a big help. That was a big help.
See, I have mixed emotions on it. I don't know if it's reassuring or if it's just kind of spooky to me. Like I'm like, you know, maybe you haven't. Maybe I don't know if I'm the weirdo and everybody else is normal, or if we're all just kind of screwed up the same way. And so it's my son's reading a self-help book right now on. I really don't even know what it's all about. We've only gotten through a couple of chapters, and he likes to talk about it. But I said, do you feel like sometimes they're speaking directly to you, and is that weird to you? And he was like, it is a little bit weird, but because it doesn't always, it's not exactly how I feel. And I was like, I know, but it's weird that somebody has experienced this enough to where they feel like they can write a book about it now. So you're not a weirdo because you feel this way. You're just like everybody else, and that part kind of scares me too.
Yeah, you know, our brains all function the same way. You know,
The chemistry is the same. And it's like a watch with all the little moving parts, and whether it's hormones or the cortisol, adrenaline dumps, we all have more. Some have more and some have less than others. But it still is a machine.
And I know after 7-7, Sergeant Nash had told me he wanted me to go talk to somebody, and I went through ATO and saw, I don't remember who it was. I saw somebody, and, you know, I talked to him, and we were there for about an hour, and they said, you know, you sound pretty good. And at the time I probably was, right? My brain was doing what it was supposed to do, right? It was taking that trauma and burying it because I had to continue on. You know, the analogy that I use is, you know, you got a chemical plant next to a river, and they take a 55-gallon drum full of that toxic waste and they go bury it next to the river and they cover it up. What happens the next day? Nothing. What happens 6 months later? Maybe still nothing. What about 2 years later, after it started to rust and the chemicals are eating away at it, and now all of a sudden those chemicals are leaching out into the water and everything's flowing downstream and poisons everything down from there. You know, that it was too fresh. It was too, you know, that was within a month of 7-7. You know, what I went through was objectively traumatic. But my brain hadn't processed it. It had just taken that toxic waste barrel and buried it down into the ground. And it was just sitting there.
Waiting. So we've just kind of gone through an entire life journey, been born in Germany, given up the very short-lived dream of being a stagehand prop setter, having an exemplary police officer career, to going through a life-changing arrest in 2022. And like I said earlier, that all these processes unfold at their own pace. They're not easy and they're not pretty for anybody, especially administratively. And you get called to the headquarters for a hearing to learn your fate. Can you talk about that?
Second longest day of my life.
You've had a lot of those.
Yeah. You know, I walked in there and Fig was there too. You're at a lot of those.
What can I say, man? I love you.
You know, there's always hope that you're going to be the one that they want to hang their hat on. But I knew what time it was. Like, there was just, you know, I'm 99% not mad at Chief Garcia for firing me, which is what happened. You know, would I have liked to have, you know, would I have liked to have been that guy that they hang their hat on? Yeah, but at the end of the day, I'm not special. Like, I'm not that special guy that you know, I'm another cop that, you know, like I said, I've spent an entire career holding people accountable for their actions. You know, what kind of an example am I if I'm not held accountable? Which is what needed to be done. So, Chief Garcia, you know, to be fair, he didn't seem to enjoy it. But
I can attest to that. Riding down the elevator with him after the hearing, it took me aback of how hard he took it, having to do that.
And, you know, I always said I'd make a lousy chief. I'm glad, you know, I like Chief Garcia a lot. You know, he's been overall pretty phenomenal for this department, which was a long time coming. You know, it sucks, but as they say, it is what it is. You know, there wasn't a whole lot to be done about it. You know, some of it's, you know, his hands were tied. So,
Well, of all that comes out of this is that you now have more tools to help yourself and make your own machine work better than it did before 2022.
oh yeah,
Because that's for you, your future, and for your family. Tactical pause. Okay.
feel free to edit out any of my stupid statements.
No, you're good. Okay, for this final question, is there anything you want to get?
I think,
But make sure it falls in the flow of what we
yeah,
already
and
have.
a little piece of this, because you just mentioned adjustments, right? An adjustment the department has made is alcohol policy. When this was being discussed, I literally told Chief Ramirez to his face, we failed Jamieson.
Bring it up,
Yeah.
bring it up. And then after, get into that, and then I'm gonna say I got a final question for you, and then you have that.
Okay.
Okay. Hang on, when I give a thumbs up.
So speaking on adjustments, I can tell you the department has made adjustments since you were fired. An alcohol policy has come out. We've had 12 officers go through that successfully.
It's outstanding.
It's amazing. Had 2 of those which promoted since going to rehab. And I can tell you when we were in discussions of coming out with this alcohol policy, I brought your name up to the chiefs, and I told them that we failed you as a department. We failed you, and we failed several other officers before you because, you know, we go through a lot of shit in this career, man, and we just didn't know how to deal with it, right? So now, you know, it's too late for all of you guys, right? But from now on, there is something available, and that's what we're here for.
And I'm going to piggyback off that too, as far as, yes, you're a casualty of this profession, and what you experience and what your friends and family have experienced, and they're still experiencing it. They're still going through this trauma with you, and your journey's not over. But I will say that sitting in this very room for a lot of the people that we have talked in, of the 12 that we have talked into and encouraged to go get help, it's rewarding, but then also it really hurts to see one of our own get arrested. Mm-hmm. And we just come on the heels of 2 other officers that were in the same situation you were in back in 2022. And if they can take anything away from your life experience, your professional experience, and what you went through from just the trauma alone into the drinking to cope into your arrest, I want them to realize that they're not alone. And every time that you go out and you drive, or you ignore the warning flags, the red flags that are waving in front of you, you're really rolling the dice on your life and your career.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's can confirm not worth it.
I have a final question. Now, and you've referred to speaking on from hindsight for the last 2 hours, mm-hmm. and it is very, very valuable to have that. What would 2024 Daniel Jamieson tell 2022 Detective Jamieson?
From the day you start the academy, and every FTO you have, every partner you have, every Instagram page that you follow, they always talk about listening to your gut, right? When the hair on the back of your neck stands up, it stands up for a reason. For me, I knew I could tell something was wrong. I didn't know what, but I needed to. Yeah, I ignored the hair on the back of my neck. Some of that is, no, I'm good. I got this. Well, if you say I got this, you don't got it. If you think something is wrong, it's probably wrong. I mean, they tell you that all the time here. If you think something's about to go down, it probably is. You know, when your brain is literally screaming at you, listen to it. And yeah, it gets heavy, and it's not easy, but nothing worth it ever is. It is a painful journey, staring the trauma in the face, looking at it. But at the end, for me, the EMDR worked great. It doesn't necessarily work for everybody. It's not the only treatment. It's not the only therapy. There's plenty of other things that are out there. But do something. Stop. Just don't sit on your ass. Like, listen to your body. Even as a preventative, start talking to somebody. I mean, the things, there could be things bothering you that you don't even realize are bothering you. And take care of yourself, because a lot of people don't. And, the frog in the boiling pot of water is very real. Sometimes, for me, I came to the realization too late. If somebody can listen to this podcast, if somebody can listen to this and go, well, that sounds like me. Oh, man. Then I think it'll be worth it. Just because I'm not a cop anymore doesn't mean I'm not a cop anymore.
Hey brother, hey sister, I'll never give up on you. Hey Mrs., hey mister, I'll see this all the way through. No matter how far the sun and the moon, I'll never give up on you. Down when you're lonely, I'll pull you up. Life leaves you heavy when the going gets tough. I'll be your shoulder, together we'll run up from Mrs., hey mister, I'll see this all the way through. No matter how far the sun and the moon, I'll never give up on you. I'll never give up on you. Hey brother, hey sister, I'll never give up on you. Hey Mrs., hey mister, I'll see this all the way through. No matter how far, for the gold and the blue, I will never give up.